In a world filled with challenges and opportunities, it's not just about having big dreams, it's about having the right approach to turn those dreams into reality. Whether you're navigating the competitive landscape of business or seeking personal growth, it's all about the approach.
And welcome to our latest episode of The Approach. I'm your host, Dr. Davis McAllister. We call this show The Approach because when I worked in military intelligence, our success and failure depended on taking the right approach. On this show, we discuss aspects of leadership and problem solving and the approaches that have made our guests successful. My guest today is Daniel McCall. Dan graduated from the University of Florida and earned his commission through Army ROTC. He has led soldiers and commanded in airborne units with deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, and it was as an observer controller at JRTC Ops Group where he discovered a passion to teach, coach, and mentor. After 8 years of active duty service, he made the jump to recruiting, where he has helped thousands of military leaders find civilian careers. With over 20 years of industry experience, he has never wavered in supporting veterans in transition. Dan enjoys supporting veteran organizations and initiatives in his North Texas community. He is a lifetime member of Frisco VFW Post 8273 and serves as the Ruck squad captain and post surgeon. Married for over 28 years to his high school sweetheart, Dan is a new granddad and is attempting to become a not so terrible golfer. Let's welcome to the stage Dan McCall.
Davis.
I'm trying not to be a terrible golfer either.
It's hard. It's a humbling game. The more I play, the worse I get.
Yeah. I thought I was a pretty good athlete at one point in time. Dan, I read through your bio and you gave a brief overview, but if you would tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you came from, and your journey along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you for inviting me. You and I have known each other now for a few years and have been in some groups there in North Texas. It's an honor to get to be on your show today. So thank you for inviting me. So I grew up as a Floridian and was really influenced by my grandfather, who was a World War II Army Ranger and POW, and he always was encouraging me to think about the military as a career. I thought I was going to be a professional football player, but I never got big enough or fast enough to play past high school football. So I took a scholarship through ROTC to go to the University of Florida. And I really found a niche there and a passion for the military and got a commission for the Army and went into the air defense artillery for the military and had my lieutenant years in the 101st Airborne Division, which people know from Band of Brothers and a lot of history. But I really wanted to jump out of airplanes and fell in love with the airborne community. And so I stayed for an extra 4 years and did my command time in the 82nd Airborne. And that's where I got to deploy twice, once to Afghanistan, once to Iraq. Had a long command time in the 82nd, over 28 months, which is about twice as long as most commands last. And then finished up my Army career at the Joint Readiness Training Center as an observer controller. Throughout my Army career, I used to get these letters in the mail that were from headhunters that said, "Hey, third platoon leader, Alpha Battery." So very generic. And yes, things actually came in the mail. That shows how long ago we're talking about here. But I would get these letters in the mail. It said, "Hey, when you get out of the Army, you should let us know. We have companies that want to hire you." So when I had made the decision that I was going to get in the Army, of course, immediately I thought, I can do this on my own. I don't need anyone's help. And so I spent about 2 months trying to do it on my own and was definitely spinning my wheels and not having a lot of success, and was isolated there in Louisiana at the Joint Readiness Training Center. So I finally answered one of those letters in the mail, and a week later I got to talk with the recruiter. A month later I had 5 or 6 interviews lined up, and
Wow.
instead of taking one of the jobs that they had me interview for, I asked the recruiter, say, "Hey, you were a big help to me. You really made a difference. As I like helping people. I'd like to
Mhm.
you do. And so I ended up going to work for the headhunter. And so I've done this for the last 20 years where I've
Mhm.
been working with transitioning military or military veterans, helping them find career opportunities in corporate America and go start their careers.
Wow, that's incredible. Can you go, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your command and the leadership involved, because that's the principle of our show is we want to talk about leadership and problem solving. And can you talk a little bit about some of the experiences that you had as an officer and a leader in the Army?
Yeah. So I will say I was very fortunate. I had successful commands, successful positions. I really did very well in the military. And I look back on it and I realize it was because I had very good NCOs. I had a really good platoon sergeant. I had good officers too. The people that I worked with and worked for were amazing. And that's really what I would say made all the difference for me. I was around very talented people, and I guess I was either smart enough or learned very quickly not to try and do everything on my own, but to really rely on people who had more experience and learn from them. So usually anytime I did that, we were successful. Anytime I tried to do it on my own, it seemed there was some learning curve there.
Yeah. For those that are listening, if you're not familiar with kind of the structure, when he's talking about NCOs, this is from a corporate standpoint. This is your mid-level management. These are the people that oversee all the operational stuff and the personnel that are doing it from day to day and making sure everything that gets done. While it allows people like Dan to be able to focus on making bigger decisions and having to focus on other things and not have to worry about the day-to-day stuff that needs to be taken care of at that level.
And the people who have the institutional knowledge, right? I'm a college graduate, 22 years old, who shows up and is responsible for a platoon. But my non-commissioned officer, my platoon sergeant, has at this point 12 to 15 years of institutional knowledge as far as how the Army works. Yeah, we see this all the time, right? Is people come into an organization new and they want to change everything. And while sometimes, yes, that needs to happen, it also is important that you're trying to listen to people before you make a lot of changes.
Mhm. So when you came in new, obviously you're coming in, you're in charge, and there's always this question when somebody new is coming in and everybody knows you're brand new, they know you just got pinned. What was the reception to you when you first came on? Because this is like what we equate to change management, right? You've got senior level people that are there that, like you said, they're part of the institution. They know what the processes are, they know how everything works. And at this point, they know more than you do as far as the day to day stuff where the unit is
Mhm.
concerned. So, what was the reception like there, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, I would say the reception is, oh, here's the new guy, right? Oh, here's another lieutenant. And the stereotype or the mindset for a lot of our soldiers, okay, he's going to come in, he's going to be care about himself and wants to, make his mark, and we'll still all be here 2 or 3 years later and trying to get things done. So there's definitely, I would say, a wall there. There's a little bit of a barrier there. And I think I was pretty fortunate that I had some good mentors who said, you need to get to know all your soldiers. You need to know their names. You need to know where they're from. You need to know if they're married. You need to know a little bit about them, and you need to not just think of them as a name only, but there's a
Mhm.
person there and you need to really connect with them. And that took a little bit of time, but boy, once that connection happened, I felt like there was a great success there. And I think I learned from that is that how important that relationship was.
Mhm. Was there one singular event or thing that happened that kind of allowed the breakthrough to come through, or did it just organically, gradually come on its own?
I think one of the things that's great at that time in the Army was the amount of responsibility
Mm.
that they would give a 22-year-old. And so I can think of this incredibly complicated uh, live fire range that I was responsible for. And what I, very quickly realized is I had no idea what I was doing, and that I absolutely needed to, lean on the people who were in my platoon who knew what was going on and knew how to do things. I was very fortunate. I had that responsibility very early and got to go through that. And then on top of it, it's the middle of summer in Clarksville, Tennessee. And so it's uncomfortable. It's hot. You're sweaty. You're hungry. You're tired. And there's a bonding that
Mhm.
can happen in circumstances like that. So, yeah, that was a great first welcome to the Army, Lieutenant. Here you go. And so, yeah, it was a great baptism by fire type of opportunity.
Mhm. Did you ever take a time to be able to sit down and just pick the brains of your NCOs and have a little bit of that extra one-on-one time with them, or did you just try to just allow everything to ease in on its own?
Oh, I think so. I think I can remember I was a very hands-on person. I always
Mhm.
felt when I would see some of my peers who would stay in their offices and
Yeah.
would lead from a desk, that just was never my personality. I always felt we could do office work later. If I had the opportunity, I wanted to be with soldiers. I wanted for them to see me going through the same things that they were going through, being in the elements. And so there's definitely some times where you just get to talk
Yeah.
because you're there, you're together. And so being present and just leaning in to the situation
Mhm.
was, for me, it wasn't intentional. I didn't have this as a strategy. I just
Mhm.
thought that what I had been taught was you should be with your soldiers. And if you're with your soldiers, then that's the right place to be. And so it was organic. It wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily intentional, but it was very impactful.
Yeah. So, with is there anything that has happened later on in life now that you've been, out of the military and worked in the civilian side of things and trying to help other people transition out of the military and into the civilian type jobs? Is there anything about that experience or any of the other experiences that have come into play later on that you can look back on and say, I'm glad I went through that?
Yeah, so a big part of my job is to do coaching. And probably the biggest part of the coaching is coaching people to be successful in their interviews.
Mhm.
And there's the common interview questions that you prep people for. Say, hey, like taking a test,
Mhm.
you need to anticipate what questions are going to be asked on a test to be successful. And the same thing with interviews, you need to anticipate what questions are likely to be asked. And so one of the questions I think people expect is, hey, what are your goals?
Mhm.
And so I would spend a lot of time coaching about, hey, my goal is to come in and learn as much as possible and really be a sponge approach. As I was prepping someone for an interview, I asked him that question. Say, hey, what is a short-term goal for you? And he had the perfect answer to me. He said, my short-term goal is to get to know everybody on my team
Mhm.
because I can't be an effective leader in this organization until they know that I actually genuinely care about them.
No.
And I thought that was a really good interview.
Yeah.
It's a much better answer than the ones I had been coaching. And I think it's really the same concept is as leaders, or even if you're not in a leadership role, if you want to be successful,
Mm.
I think it's so much is dependent on your ability to relate to the people that you're working with.
Yeah. Did you ever witness people that take the opposite of strategy, that they've come in and they're coming in guns a blazing and I'm in charge and you do what I say type scenarios?
Yeah, I've seen that, and it's uncomfortable to watch. And usually the thing that you see is people become very resistant. In the military, they kind of tune people out. They don't necessarily follow that person. They'll obey orders, they'll do the right thing, they'll do what they're supposed to do, but they're not inspired by that type of leadership. In corporate America, what I've seen is when someone comes in with that mindset is people leave.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you see is that people then say, I'll find somewhere else.
Yeah. I have experienced that. I saw it in the military, but I've also experienced it on the civilian side as well. I was working in a facility, and they hired somebody that had just gotten their MBA and came in the door, the least experienced in the industry out of everybody that was there, and came in with this attitude of, you're going to do what I say because I said, when I'm your boss. And it did not go over well. And needless to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it funny. I find in recruiting, we'll see where companies who aren't management or hiring authority, who's not former military, sometimes have the misconception or preconceived notions that people coming from the military, that is their leadership style, that it's very
Mhm.
authoritative, and that it is going to be very my way or the highway type leadership style. And I use my example and said, there are leaders like that in the military. Sure, there's leaders like that in every organization, but the military has built a professional, non-commissioned officer corps that is very much considered respected, and good leaders coming from the military understand that's not how you motivate people.
No.
That's not how you can inspire people. I try and encourage and coach our clients and hiring authorities as well to not, believe that everything in Hollywood on how people lead in the military is always that way.
Yeah. No, it's funny because there's people that just have this concept that everybody in the military just stands around yelling at each other all the time. And it's actually further from the truth where that's
Yeah.
concerned. And I'm sure that there's some units that's probably is the case, but I don't feel like that's the majority of the time. I really feel like that there's more of an interest in promoting the idea of seek first to understand. Sometimes you are in situations where you see something and it may not be exactly what you thought you saw, but the picture that you got at the time warranted a reaction. And there's been times that I had to go back and apologize for the reaction that I had because it wasn't what I thought I saw. And those things happen. But I feel like you also have to be big enough to say, you know what, I was wrong in that situation. I handled that wrong, and apologize for that too. Is there anything else in your deployments? Do you have any cool stories for us as far as you made 2 trips overseas, and anything that you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, I think the thing that I really took away from my military experience, being in the 82nd Airborne Division, our mentality was we can be anywhere in the world in
Mhm.
18 hours or less. And so that was the training focus, that was the operational focus, is you have to be ready to go when called. You're not going to get a 6-month train up. You have to be ready to go when called. Both of my deployments were not 18-hour deployments.
Yeah.
We didn't have to make that type of knee-jerk reaction, but they were very short ramp up times. They were
Mhm.
only a couple weeks from, hey, this is coming, and boom, we're boots on the ground. And
Yeah.
so what I really take away from that is just how important it is to be ready
Mhm.
when you have your opportunity.
Yeah.
And you're not always going to have a chance to prep, and sometimes it's ready, shoot, aim versus ready, aim, shoot. And I think back to that experience of just understanding that, hey, sometimes you just have to go do it and not overanalyze everything. And even for me, that was probably I like to think through things. Yeah, I like to try and be strategic and
Mhm.
really put a plan into place. And my wife will say, if we're on vacation and the plan doesn't happen the way I plan, it's hard for me to adjust to that. For my military experience where it was quick and it was fast, I think that was it was just a crazy time, because
Yeah.
to again be pretty young at this point. I'm probably in my mid to late 20s, and going to Afghanistan very early in that theater where things were pretty austere. It was
Things were not
very,
as well
we
established.
weren't riding around on horseback, but it wasn't a mature theater. And even in Iraq, it was pretty early into that. Just, I think for me, it was just this experience of, hey, just go do things and don't overthink it. At the same time, I will also say, sometimes you'll just learn from your mistakes too. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I really look back on and becoming an armchair quarterback and thinking through things is, there were decisions we made, there were things we did where I feel like we were fighting a past war
Mhm.
instead of really thinking about, okay, what is this war really about? And I think I've seen that and really tried to apply that in business and in my career afterwards. If you're only thinking about how things have always been,
Mhm.
you're going to be continuously behind. Try to think about what's evolving, what's coming next, and try to be thinking about the future as you're making plans versus just the past.
Yeah. I've seen it in both the military. I've seen it in working with in athletics and sports. I've also seen it in the business world that a lot of people develop this habit of being reactive thinkers rather than proactive and trying to anticipate things that are coming, anticipate changes that are coming.
Mhm.
And it's actually a big market now, people being hired to come in and oversee change management because there's
Yeah.
changes going on in the company or they're anticipating a change and they need somebody that can come in and help manage that change. So when you were in those deployments, obviously, there was different times that the scope of the mission changed and you had different things that were evolving. What were some of the experiences that you had as far as, or what you took away from those types of changes and how you managed that?
Yeah, the one that really stands out to me was the decentralized decision making and how decentralized execution. But when I say decentralized, you have from the very top, people make decisions, and that those people are usually very well experienced and highly educated, and they're making these decisions at the top. But as you go where the rubber really is meeting the road, where
Mhm.
you go where actually those decisions where things are happening, and we called it the strategic corporal in Iraq is really it's that team leader, it's that first line supervisor who's making a decision about engaging an enemy or providing a service to a civilian group of people. And you've got media, you have the nation building concept all going on. And we're putting a lot of responsibility on a very giant group of people.
Mhm.
And, and so it was very much about you can't just be up making decisions and thinking that's going to be the strategic impact. Really, you need to be educating, coaching, teaching, trying to influence the decision, the people who actually are making decisions that are going to impact what
Mhm.
is actually happening on the ground and what we're seeing. Yeah, I just saw this change of a the linear battlefield where the generals and the colonels were making the decisions that really matter, and it really became a very decentralized, very nebulous battlefield where really the people who were making the decisions that matter the most were the people who were frontline there,
Mhm.
and they needed help and needed to be resourced to help make the best decisions they could.
You get that there's that disconnect, and there's a perceived disconnect in just about every work environment, whether it's the military or corporate America. There always seems to evolve into a disconnect where you have the people that are there on the front line, like you said, they're having to evolve and deal with the situation that's right there in front of them. And it may not necessarily be what's on the focus and the radar of the people back here. And then it causes a conflict. Did you ever see those kind of conflicts or have to get involved in that to mitigate? Because where you were as an officer, you're
Mhm.
the middleman between the people that are out there doing the work versus the ones that are up here making the decision, and you're the conduit to connect the two. Yeah.
Yeah. So when that the job I had at the Joint Readiness Training Center as an observer controller was it was to point out that disconnect. It was to show senior leaders that, hey, this was your mission and this was your intent. It never got down to this person here who had to actually make the decision. If you had asked him, hey, what was the commander's intent? What is the mission? What was the task and purpose involved? They didn't know.
Mhm.
So communication, it was our job to point this out, and we stressed them. We put them in very stressful situations to really magnify the importance of it.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, in corporate America, I experienced the same thing. And oftentimes, a corporate mission statement sounds really great, but if your employees don't really understand it and don't internalize it, If mission, vision, and values is just a slide that you're doing once a year, then you're really not influencing the people that you need to influence, and people need to believe those. And I also feel like one of the biggest mistakes I've seen with mission, vision, values is it comes from the top and there's never any input from the folks who actually have to execute it. So I encourage folks is, hey, come together collectively to build your
Mhm.
mission and your vision and your values. If it's just the person at the top making it, yeah, it may never get down to the bottom. But if the people who are executing are actually helping shape the mission, vision, and values, now they have buy-in.
Yeah.
Now they're invested and they're much more likely to pay attention if
Mhm.
they were collaborative in developing it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of varying degrees on, because you talked about values and core values. And for those that are listening, your core values of whether it's your organization, your family, your personal, the way you run your personal life, your core values should guide, it should be the guide that your decisions are made on. And if, as long as it stays within the bounds of those values, that then it's either a yes or a no if it's within those bounds. And I don't feel like that there's a lot of companies that really emphasize that when we make decisions, this is the values that we make those decisions based on, and then stay consistent to that.
But we really recognize the ones that do. The ones that do, they stand out. The ones that are closed on Sunday, or the ones that that really do show that customer comes first. And yeah, those the ones that do, you notice them.
Anything else that you want to share with your deployment experience before we head into dive deep into more on how you help our military veterans transitioning out?
I would just say if anyone's listening to this and they have someone, either they're thinking about going in the military or they're thinking or they know someone who's going in the military, uh, that when I was deployed, the Air Force bases had the best food. I'm just saying the Air Force bases they had like food court type food. When in the Army did not have as good of food. So if that helps you make a decision, I hope I can help you today.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that because my last duty station, we were butted right up against an Air Force base, and we got in trouble because all the Army personnel kept going over to the Air Force base and eating dinner, and they said, "You're costing us
My
money."
guys are like, they have ice cream, sir. They have ice cream.
And I can tell you one of the best chow halls that I ever ate in was actually run by the Navy. Every Thursday was surf and turf when we were stationed out there together in California. Any other day, they would allow you to come in for surf and turf, but any other day, we had people stationed outside the Navy chow hall, turning people back and sending them back to the Army chow. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. So, talk a little bit more about, you talked about how you got into the military transition and helping with headhunting. What are some things that you really want veterans to know and some experiences that you've had with that?
So I've been out of the Army now for 20 years.
Mhm.
And I would say I had a successful transition
Mhm.
from military to civilian life. But to be honest, I still feel like I'm transitioning. I'm still trying to adjust and really even just find somewhere where I'm comfortable. And I would say for anyone who, yeah, and it doesn't only have to be from the military. I think people make transitions all the time. And I would just say to give yourself plenty of grace when you're going through transitions. Hard, change is hard, and change is a journey. It's not just a destination. And so I still feel like I'm on that journey. Yeah, I'm still learning and still realizing things that I didn't know the first few years of my transition. And 20 years later, I'm feeling like, hey, I'm just starting to figure some of these things out. One of the things I always want to encourage for veterans and really for anybody out there is to understand that when you are in transition, it's much harder to do it if you're trying to do it on your own.
Yeah.
If you're flying solo, it's hard. The more help you can get, the more assistance you can get, the more you can share, the more people you can bring alongside you,
Yeah.
the better counsel you get, the better advice you get. You're more likely to be successful, and it's really hard to do things big change on your own. So I just encourage people to reach out, get get the resources to help you, whether you're transitioning military or transitioning in other phases of life.
Mhm. Do you recommend that people, I guess for lack of a better term, take a break from the time that they transition out before they try to start transitioning into something else in the civilian world if they don't have a plan already?
I tell people to be patient, right? To not feel like they've got to have it immediately figured out. It's okay to have some buffer. I like when I hear some of the coaches who I follow, they talk about have margin, right? Don't put yourself in such a tight situation. Try to build margin, try to give yourself some buffer, allow yourself to be patient. It's a career transition. Your first career or your next career, you don't have to get it perfect. You're not going to get it perfect.
Yeah.
It's okay for it to be a bridge. I'm fine with bridges. I'm fine with people being. I encourage people volunteer, take time to discover. It's okay to work in the gig economy. We have
Mhm.
amazing opportunities that are available to people now where you can go do something that earns you money and at the same time be trying to figure out what you want to do next.
Yeah.
And so this idea that you have to be perfect and nail it, in the beginning, I think we live in such a great time. I think the
Mhm.
phrase is overused, but it's very, I think it's very much in play is we have the ability to pivot
Mhm.
in today's society so much easier than previous generations have, where
Mhm.
hey, you got stuck into something that was what you were expected to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
People can switch careers, change careers, pivoting and doing different things. So yeah, I encourage people not to put so much pressure, not to feel this immediate sense of I have to get it right out of the gate. Y- it's okay to have some cushion, and it's expected that you're probably going to have a pivot or two.
Yeah. So when you're working with some of these veterans that are transitioning out, is there a specific approach that you think that some of them may need to take if they need to get some school under the belt first before they're ready to transition? How do you counsel those veterans that are in that situation?
Yeah, it depends on what they want to do. There are times when maybe what you want to do isn't what you're qualified to do. And
Mhm.
so when that's the case, I think, yes, now school may be the right option. But I also find that sometimes school is not the right option. Sometimes schools is maybe what you really want to do doesn't require more school. It's so I really try and focus into people as much as possible. Say, hey, what do you really enjoy doing? What gives you? There's a really good program that I've become a fan of, and I can modify a little bit in my work. But let's go. Tell me about the job where you've had, maybe in the military, maybe it was prior to military, maybe it was in your professional career, maybe it's not been in your professional career. But what type of work, what type of job have you had where you felt energized, where
Mhm.
you felt like, hey, this is feeding me. Like I'm motivated. I want to go to work every day. This is something that really inspires me.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, ask yourself the opposite question. Okay, now tell me about a job or about a task that you've had where you were drained by it,
Mhm.
where it sucked all of your energy. And oh, by the way, you might have been really good at it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily, it's not the same as what you're good at, but it's what do you enjoy? And because you might be good at it, but if it drains you and if it's going to burn you out. And yeah, you really want to find that type of work, the dignity of work that you want
Mhm.
is something that really energizes you.
Yeah. So one of the complaints that I've heard with veterans and the transitioning between people trying to transition into a business type world, their biggest complaint is that the people on the business side, not on the civilian side, don't seem to see the values and what these veterans can bring to the table based on their experience, even though their skill level may not be exactly a match for what they're wanting. It, from my perspective, skills can be trained, but there's certain things that take time, and a lot of those values that you get out of the military, that's something that's developed over time. So Have you found yourself in the position where you've been able to be an intermediary between the business and the veteran for them to be able to see the value that they didn't necessarily view before?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up there because I think part of what's causing that is the way that people today are conducting their job searches.
Mhm,
We are heavily depending on technology.
mhm,
We're expecting that, hey, if I'm applying to this job through a website or I'm applying to this job on LinkedIn and I'm sending in my resume, maybe I have a cover letter to go with it. Somebody who has never been in the military, who probably has, in a lot of cases, never known anybody in the military,
yeah,
to understand all these soft skills or all these intangibles that the military is known for and expecting them to be able to understand it and they're just not going to, but that's the cycle now, or that's the hamster wheel that I find so many people get on. Is I'm trying to do this all through this technology platform, and what they're missing is the majority of people who get hired are hired because somebody was willing to recommend them.
mhm,
And so for somebody who's transitioning from the military, I would encourage you, if you're wanting to go to work for a company, they are hiring you, they've got positions. I would say try to find a veteran at
mhm,
that company. It'd be great if you know them, or if it'd be great if you had something in common, but veterans want to help other veterans.
yeah,
I really do. Reach out, find a veteran who's there, and don't immediately ask for them to recommend you because they don't know you. They
yeah,
need to get to know you well enough to be willing to recommend. So start by just saying, "Hey, you're working for this company and I'm really interested. I'd love to pick your brain about work, what it's
mhm,
been like for you working there. I'd love to pick your brain about your transition. Just ask for a relationship piece, or better yet, if you know somebody who's there, and say,
mhm,
"Hey, I really like to know more about your company, but would you be willing to recommend me?"
yeah,
And that has been the thing that I find helps the most. And for companies where I find it really helps them when they're interviewing, even if the hiring authority is not a veteran,
mhm,
bring a veteran to the interview,
yeah,
because one, the veteran that they're interviewing will feel more comfortable and just more natural if there's someone else in the room who understands a little bit about what they've gone through. So
yeah,
there's, I think, just a little bit of disarming, or a little puts them more at ease. So
mhm,
you get a better idea of what they're really like. They're not as nervous. And then after the interview, the hiring authority should be able to go to that veteran and say, "Hey, so was he telling the truth?
yeah,
Was he, or was she maybe embellishing a little bit?" But I think most of the time, if I no, that's really what they do. No,
yeah,
that's really, I can see that, and I think it really helps. But we've
yeah,
got to get off this technology platform that
mhm,
we're so reliant on, and
yeah,
expecting that that's going to be the problem solver.
yeah. It's one of those things because I travel around and I do some public speaking, and I've started getting some attention from HR conferences and resources, and they're very adamant about trying to develop more AI type based hiring practices and managing personnel and trying to comb through. And I think from a sifting standpoint, if you embed certain values and things like that, it can get you to a start, but there's still got to be that human element that's got to be a part of that process. And to sit
Crazy to
down
me
and
to think
actually,
that the
yeah, go ahead.
for me to think that the Department of Human Resources is
Yeah.
wanting to do more with artificial intelligence. I was like, if there's one department out there that we should put the barriers up on keeping AI out of, maybe it should be the human element of business. But yeah, look, we've got to embrace technology. We have to understand that there's the old school way of doing things, and I'm guilty of sometimes being still looking at the old school, and so we do need to use technology, and there's a place
Mhm.
for it. But I also think at some point the human element still needs to be, especially in the human resources side.
Yeah. What advice would you give veterans that are getting ready for an interview? Because veterans, as a general, we're very direct and how we talk. And if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you a direct answer. There doesn't tend to be a lot of fluff there. For people that are not used to dealing with veterans, it can be alarming or whatever word you want to use with that. What would you advise veterans to do that if they know that they're fixing to go into an interview situation and that person is not used to being around veterans?
Yeah, you need to have the right approach, right?
Hmm.
You really need to understand that you're this interview is not about you.
Hmm.
This interview is about how you can help this business, how you can help this manager be more successful.
Yeah.
And if you're just going to go in there and just say, this is how I am, this is who I am, this is what, take it or leave it, you're going to fail. You really have to have an approach that is very much focused on your audience. It is one where you should come into this interview prepared. And everyone thinks that, oh, but being prepared means I know the all the details about the company. I think being prepared also means some things about yourself.
Hmm.
But more importantly, I think being prepared means you're coming to this interview prepared with questions
Yeah.
that you can use to engage
Hmm.
this person who's doing the interview, because you'll learn so much more
Yeah.
in an interview by listening.
Hmm.
And so if you can ask some good questions that are not, hey, what's in this for me
Yeah.
type questions, but are questions that are more geared towards, hey, tell me about your company. Tell me about the people there. Tell me what success looks like. Tell me how I could be successful. What
Hmm.
would I need to do to make you look good? Right.
Hmm.
If you can do those things in the interview, if you can really take the approach from being focused on yourself
Yeah.
and instead focus on the other person in the room,
Yeah.
then you're much more likely to have a successful interview,
Hmm.
because what interviewing typically really comes down to, why companies hire someone. Companies, I believe, and managers hire people who they like.
Hmm.
They hire people who they think their team will like. And
Hmm.
and for anyone who's ever been in a management position, I think you can understand why. Usually
Yeah.
the toughest job that a manager has
Hmm.
is when there is conflict within their team. When
Yeah.
people don't get along, you're not going to be successful, and
Hmm.
the manager is constantly trying to fix that. And so if
Yeah.
you can come across in an interview as being someone who they would like and that they think the rest of their team will like, you have an
Hmm.
advantage.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would advise veterans to pay a little bit closer attention to that often gets overlooked? Or does it ever seem to really get brought up until much further along, but then it should have really been paid attention to early on in the process?
Yeah, I've been coaching and teaching for the last 5 or 6 years now with different transition groups that are doing internships and fellowships and
Mhm.
skills training for transitioning military. And where I've really found there's a lack of understanding and information is what to do when you get to the offer stage in a job interview. I think there's very good information out there about how to write your resume. And there's probably even some pretty good coaching when it comes to interviewing. But navigating the offer process, knowing how to receive an offer, knowing how to accept or decline the
Mhm.
offer is not something that people in the military have experience with. And really, even individuals in professional careers maybe do offer negotiation 2 or 3 times in their career. It's
Yeah.
not something that they're gonna do a lot of. So I experience my experience has been start with the end in mind when you're beginning your search, know what's important to you, and money's important. Usually know what your range is, know what your salary history is, and then know what you're expecting in your range.
Yeah.
And early in the interview process, before you get to the manager side, but when you're dealing with the recruiter or the person who's screening,
Yeah.
find out, hey, what is the range for this position? And if they ask you, well, what's your range? Well, tell them what your range is and say,
Mhm.
look, this is what I've been making. This is based on what my experience and education and my technical skills. I expect to make more, or maybe, hey, I'm willing to even make a little bit less if it gets my foot in the door. But this is my range. And if
Mhm.
you're within that range, great, let's move forward. And if
Yeah.
not, then maybe something else later on will come. But having a benchmark to make sure you're not wasting your time. And then when you get to the offer stage, I think it makes things so much easier if you understand what the range has been.
Yeah. What would you suggest if their recommended range is they've created a job title and they're trying to hire somebody and they've posted, this is the range that we're thinking, and you come in, maybe you're a little higher than what their range is that they're offering. Is there some negotiation that you feel like is possible there? Or should veterans look at that and say, this is the range they're offering? If I'm not willing to be in that range, I might as well not waste my time.
I think be transparent about it and say at the beginning of the interview, say, hey, thank you for sharing the range with me. I think I feel like I'm competitive at a higher amount. If you feel like that is something that you're flexible on, great.
Mhm.
Let's keep interviewing. If you
Yeah.
know that, hey, that's a hard stop, we can't go above that, then keep me in mind if something else comes up. There's always other opportunities. There's no reason for you to settle on something just because hey, this is what's available now. It's okay to keep going. Maybe at some point you do need to recalibrate, or maybe yes, maybe I need to go back and get more school to be more competitive for this, or maybe I need to get an internship, or maybe I need to get more training to be competitive for this upper range. I think it's okay for you to be transparent, and then if they don't think that, then it's okay to go keep looking.
Yeah. So when you're coaching and mentoring these veterans to get ready to try to get out and transition out, do you help them get a better understanding of what their range is
Oh,
based
yeah.
on their education and experience and all those things?
Yeah, there's websites and data that's out there, and of course, if it's on the internet, it's always true.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course not. So that but it's one source, and then I encourage talk to your peers, the people that you've served with, the people that maybe you're in some of these transition classes with, and whenever people talk about how much money they're making, they're never gonna lie, right? They're never gonna exaggerate maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Of course they are. We're human. There's a tendency to maybe try to make yourself sound like you're doing a little bit better than you are. So you can't trust the internet. You can't always trust the people that are your peers. I encourage people talk to recruiters. If you're a headhunter like
Mhm.
me, look. I know what my range is. I'll tell you, hey, this is what we've seen this
Yeah.
past year. Here's the range. If someone tells me, hey, I want to make this much, I'll say, you're not. I don't think you're going to. I think you're overshooting what's realistic. You take that
Yeah.
for what it's worth. You might be able to go get it and prove me wrong because
Yeah.
gosh knows people have proved me wrong plenty of times. But
Yeah.
this is what I see.
Mhm.
If you're talking to a recruiter for a company,
Mhm.
ask them, "Hey, this is what I'm making." I think you have to always understand your salary history matters. Generally, the people at companies who work in human resources, they are salary analysts. Their
Yeah.
job is to know, "Hey, this is what we need to pay for this." And they know what your salary, especially if you're coming from the military, because
Mhm.
it's public information.
Yeah.
It's not a secret.
Yeah.
What is interesting is most people in the military, they have no idea how much money they make.
Yeah.
Like, they don't really know because it's not like they have any influence of it. It's not like they have any they can't negotiate that. You're paid this amount because this is your rank and this is your time in service.
Yeah.
If you ask senior leaders, usually underestimate. They actually are making more than they think they are. And I usually
Mhm.
find that the junior leaders are actually overestimating. They usually think they're making more than they are. But corporate America knows. The salary analysts that work in
Mhm.
HR, they know, and they know when they set those ranges. So yeah, just I think you can ask a headhunter, you can ask a recruiter, and what's really interesting is how big the ranges are sometimes. Companies will have jobs posted, and say, "This job pays between 60,000 and 120,000,
Yeah.
depending on experience."
Yeah.
And so that's a 60,000. And usually what, the job seeker thinks is, "I can make 120,000."
Yeah.
And what the company is thinking is, "We're only gonna pay 60,000," because it's not that they're evil people, it's just it's business, and controlling salary is the same as controlling expenses and controlling cost. So it is a negotiation. It is a bit of a transaction that's taking place, and it's a big personal decision for us in the job market. For the company, it's more of a transaction.
Yeah. Because I've been in situations that I've been the finalist for a position and a decent position, and the salary was decent, but I ended up getting passed over because of my level of education and experience. They were going to have to pay me more than somebody, else. I ended up losing out on the job because they didn't want to have to pay more because it's still a business decision on their part. So, yeah. So, can you give us a picture of a little bit of if somebody reaches out to you, or do they reach out to you? Do you reach out to people? You can explain the process as a headhunter of what that looks like from start to finish.
Yeah. So headhunting sounds so exciting, right? It sounds like I think of the witch doctor with a necklace of, of ears and the torches burning in the background, right? Yeah. But my thing is, yes, I want to connect with you. So if you're
Mhm.
transitioning military or you're a military veteran who's early in their career, I usually tell people, usually, hey, 5 to 10 years post military experience is my sweet spot for folks. But reach out to me. I find LinkedIn is fantastic because it is a Rolodex, and it's something that you carry with you. I've got over 15,000 connections on LinkedIn. People don't always need a headhunter, but when you do, I think it's great to have that ability to pull up my contact information. I've only had two work email addresses in 2 years, but when it did change, LinkedIn allowed it to change. So I encourage anybody who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're a military veteran, I'll connect with you. And then, yeah, I do go find people because I'll get a job from a client and they tell me this is what we're looking for. And so, first place I look is within my connections, within my internal group. But then I also quickly start looking for people outside of that. But yeah, I'd love for folks to connect with me.
Mhm.
That way I can look you up if I have a job and hear what my client's looking for.
Yeah. So from a financial end, because veterans coming out, they're tend to be worried a little bit more about money side and things like that. What's it going to cost them to be able to connect with you or any type of recruiter?
Yeah, so it should you should never pay a recruiter any money at any time. Companies use headhunters to find, interview, and hire the very best talent that's out there and available to them in the market. If they're a really big company, they probably have internal recruiters who do that for them. But if they're either a smaller company or maybe a company that doesn't have a huge name recognition that's going to get thousands of applications weekly, they're
Mhm.
likely to use a headhunter and pay the headhunter if they hire someone who was introduced to them. I'm absolutely for profit and trying to make a living and have done so for the last 20 years. Babies need shoes, and so I'd like for babies to have shoes in my family, but I will never charge the job seeker. It's always the company who pays that fee. If you're in a job search, I don't recommend ever paying a headhunter. I also don't recommend paying for someone to write your resume. I don't think anyone will write your resume better than you. No one
Yeah.
will spend more time working on that resume than you will. There's incredible examples. Don't feel like you have to figure it out on your own. There's wonderful books and guides and examples, but you can save $500 and write your own resume.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, though, don't pay for a headhunter. Don't pay for someone to help you with a job search, but paying for coaching is different. I feel like we all could use better coaching. If you want to lose weight, the best way to do that is to get a dietitian or a personal trainer and someone who can help you. If you use coaches, you're paying for coaching. You're
Yeah.
paying for their content. You're paying for them to come alongside you and invest and help you. That's what
Mhm.
you're paying for.
Yeah.
That's different than paying a recruiter. Recruiters are paid by companies, but paying for coaching, you're paying for the content, you're paying for that help. So I always
Yeah.
make sure people know, I'm not saying don't pay for coaching. Coaching will
Mhm.
help you, but don't pay for a recruiter.
Yeah. All right. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your information. I really want people to know what their options are, but you never know what connection you're going to make with somebody. And share some final thoughts and then tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned earlier, I feel like one of the biggest mistakes we always try to make is we're just trying to do things on our own. And when we were in the military, we were successful because of other people that were around us. And so when you make this transition out, don't get isolated. Don't be by yourself. You can be successful without using a recruiter. You can do this job search on your own. But I would encourage all the veterans, find community. And it doesn't always have to be a military community. I'm a life member for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. It's been a great community for me, but for some folks, maybe your community is your church. Maybe
Yeah.
your community is a school that your kids are at. And
Mhm.
I've done both of those. And those are great communities in whatever season you're in. But I would just encourage people, don't do this alone. Don't be isolated. Build community. And especially for those of us among, that's what we are used to, and we need to keep that to have a successful transition. The
Yeah.
best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure, Davis, you've got my information to put in the notes. Best way to get connected with me is LinkedIn. Send me a message. If you're in a I need help right now mode with the job search, hey, send me an email. Send me your resume. Send me an email. Let me know that you're looking for some assistance. I'd love to help you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again for coming on and sharing your information. I really hope that those of you that are listening, there's options out there for you, and you don't have to do it alone. Like Dan said, don't do it alone. Utilize your resources, get the help that you need. And who better to help you than another veteran that's gone through the process and understand it. So with that, again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Approach. Please hit that like button and subscribe for the latest episodes. If you would like to be a guest or would like for Dr. McAllister to speak at your business or event, you can email him at info@drdavismcallister.com. You can also go to his website at drdavismcallister.com.